Hello and welcome to DOZ Monologues, hosted by Eturuvie Erebor. DOZ Monologues, also known as DOZ Chronicles Audio Stories, aims to educate, inspire, and drive societal change. All stories are written and narrated by Eturuvie Erebor, and all rights are reserved, including the right of reproduction in whole or in part in any form. This is episode 8, titled New Beginnings. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you. New Beginnings. It was truly a new beginning for David and me, I concluded as I looked around the 3-bedroom flat that Richard had rented and furnished for us. My heart was filled with joy. "Mommy, is this our new house?" David asked. I turned to look at my 4-year-old and flashed him a big smile. "Yes, David," I said, "it's our new home. Do you like it?" "Yes," he answered and dashed across the living room to grab the remote control on the coffee table. As he struggled to put on the 40-inch television, I strolled through the house, admiring the kitchen and moving on to peek into my bedroom and then David's, which had been decorated in his favorite colors and featuring his favorite cartoon characters. There were toys everywhere, including a new bicycle. "David, come and take a look at your bedroom," I called, and he raced energetically from the living room to be at my side. "Wow, Mom, look!" he exclaimed, pointing in complete astonishment. There was a loud knock on the front door. I looked at my watch and decided it had to be the caterer. Richard was visiting for lunch, and as I had only just moved in, I had contracted the services of a local caterer. I rushed to the front door, and true enough, there was Adesua, a young woman in her mid-20s who ran a successful catering business. Next to her was my gateman. I smiled at him. "Thank you, Henry," I said, before turning to the younger woman. "Adesua, thank you for accommodating my last-minute order. Please come in." "Thank you, Ora." She came in carrying the items with Henry's help. For the next 30 minutes, she set up the table with a variety of dishes, including jollof rice, fried rice, chicken, snails, fried plantains, and a large red velvet cake with the words, "Welcome to my home, Richard," inscribed on it. Richard loved red velvet cake, and I hoped he would appreciate the gesture. What else could I give him? What did one give a man who had everything? I considered how much my life had changed since meeting Richard. I was born 31 years ago to unwed parents. My mother told me that my father's family never liked her as she was from a different tribe. She hailed from Ughelli in Delta State, and my father was a Bini man from Edo State, Nigeria. Within a year of my birth, my father left Ughelli and returned home to Benin, quickly marrying a woman from his tribe. My mother returned to live in her father's house, taking me with her. As a young child, I was often called a bastard, the child of a useless man, and a child born by mistake. Family and friends advised my mother to take me to my father so that she could marry. When I was 8 years old, my mother finally succumbed to pressure when a man she liked took an interest in her. She packed my bags and we boarded a bus that took us from Ughelli to Benin. When we arrived at my father's house, my mother pushed me towards him and said, "Oh dear, that is your child. She is your responsibility." And without another word, she turned and walked off. No one could deny that I was my father's child, as I looked more like him than his son and 3 daughters born in his marriage. But that did not mean he wanted me. My life started to take a turn for the worse. I stopped going to school and became a housemaid, doing housework that was far beyond my capabilities. One morning, I took my younger siblings to school, and as I watched them walk through the school gates, I began to cry because I too wanted to go to school. "I want to go to school," I said to my stepmother when I got home. She took her shoe off and beat me mercilessly. Did your useless mother drop money for your school fees? When my father returned that evening, they sat out on the veranda eating, and she told him the story. It was decided that I should learn a skill instead of going to school, so they entrusted me to a woman I still call Aunty Vivian to this day. Aunty Vivian ran a successful hairdressing and tailoring business and often took on apprentices. Despite my being underage, she agreed to take me on because, as a woman who was still trying to conceive at the time, she felt sorry for me. Aunty Vivian became like a second mother to me. She taught me more than just hairdressing and tailoring. She shared valuable life lessons and instilled important values in me. She was an intelligent woman who had not been able to attend university due to poverty. Despite this, she began to homeschool me in her shop without my father and stepmother's knowledge. 3 years after that, my mother wanted me to visit her in Ughelli for the Easter holiday. I was excited, yet my life with my mother was almost identical to my life with my father. The same way I felt excluded in my father's home was the way I felt excluded in my mother's home. Just as my father and stepmother used me as a nanny for their children, my mother and stepfather did the same for their 2 small children born 11 months apart. The same way my stepmother insulted me and my mother was the same way my stepfather insulted me and my father. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in both my father's home and my mother's home. And did my mother care about my plight in my father's home? How could she, when she did not care about the way I was discriminated against under her nose and in her home? I realized that she only invited me to serve as a free and reliable nanny for her children. For the next 3 years, I moved from house to house, living with my father during term time and my mother during the holidays. But I stopped going to my mother's when I was 14 years old. I visited her for the 6-week summer break. Her children were at play school for half the break, and I collected them one afternoon. My stepfather was home when we arrived, which was odd, but I didn't think much of it. The children were tired, and so by the time I had given them a shower and their lunch, they were ready for their afternoon nap. Once they fell fast asleep, I asked my stepfather if he wanted something to eat, and he requested that I bring it to the bedroom. It was an odd request because he always ate at the dining table in the living room, but I obliged as I didn't dare question his preference. I almost dropped the tray of food when I entered his bedroom a few minutes later to find him sprawled on the bed, dressed only in his vest and briefs and displaying a visible erection. "Bring the food here," he snapped impatiently as I hesitated by the door. He gestured to the table beside the bed, and on shaky legs and with trembling hands and a rattling tray, I approached the bed, not looking at him as I knelt and placed the food tray on the table. As I stood up, he grabbed my waist and covered my mouth, and I fell backwards onto the bed with him. My heart raced as I prayed fervently, my eyes darting around for something, anything, to knock him over the head so I could escape, but there was nothing. His hand was still over my mouth, stopping me from screaming, even as he pinned me to the mattress with the top half of his body, and his other hand groped me. Just when I lost hope and surrendered myself to my fate, my little brother appeared in the open doorway. "Daddy, I peed on the bed," he said gently. My stepfather froze, and I seized that opportunity to push him off me and run outside. I walked to my mother's shop and asked her to accompany me home to pack my things and leave for Benin. Before I could explain, my stepfather phoned her, barring me from his home due to my entering his room while he was undressed. Without waiting for me to speak, my mother slapped me hard across the face. "Prostitute," she shouted several times. "You are a prostitute, a useless girl, good for nothing." I fled from her and put a little distance between us. As we made our way to the house, she shouted insults and claimed I was trying to destroy her marriage and ruin her life like my father had. When we arrived at the house, my bag was outside and my belongings were scattered all over the veranda. "You brought your promiscuous child into my home to influence my children," my stepfather yelled at my mother. "How do I know she has not started to molest them under my roof? I should put your things out with hers." My mother went on her knees. "Please, my husband, don't be angry with me," she begged. "I had no idea she had become wayward, living in her father's house. Please have mercy on me. I made a mistake, but it will not happen again." "It had better not," he said. "If I see her in this house again, you are out of this marriage." My mother stood and hurriedly packed up my things, threw some money at me, and pushed me away from her front door. "Go away," she said. "Don't break up my marriage." I left and never looked back, and never shared the story with anyone except Aunty Vivian. After that incident, my sojourn in my father's house became bearable. Yes, I was used as a maid, but not once was I in danger of being sexually molested. At 19, I left home after a fallout with my father and stepmother. I wanted to enroll in evening classes to prepare for WAEC and JAM exams to help me gain university admission. My father and stepmother refused, even though I didn't need their financial help. It made no sense since my younger brother was already at university and my sister was preparing to write WAEC and JAM. I moved out and Aunty Vivian, who was pregnant and was no longer coming to the shop as often, put me in charge of the business and allowed me to live there, sleeping in the back room which was used to store products. I ran the business for her during the day and attended classes in the evening. My first year was a failure, but I succeeded spectacularly in the second. I relocated and got a room near campus. Aunty Vivian gave me a sewing machine and I was able to make clothes, do alterations and braid hair in my one room, which helped me to get through university. After completing my degree, my business was booming, so I chose to stay at the university, renting a flat and running my business, while my classmates left for National Youth Service and job hunting. This was when I met Andy. He was a lecturer at the university and we became involved. It was my first relationship because as an undergraduate, balancing my business and studies left me with very little time for romance. With the benefit of hindsight, my naivety made me an easy target. He moved very quickly and in my foolishness I called it love. He talked about marriage and a family, saying all the right things, and I saw no harm in us living together, so I gave up my flat and moved into his 3-bedroom house in the university's staff quarters. He taught me to drive and let me use his car, while he used an official vehicle attached to his department to get to and from work. A year later, I discovered that I was 8 weeks pregnant. I left the doctor's office with mixed feelings. On the one hand, I was excited to be carrying Andy's baby, but on the other hand, I was worried that my life was starting to resemble my mother's. Andy was of Igbo descent and his family had not been welcoming towards me. According to his sister, their mother, who exclusively spoke Igbo, wouldn't allow Andy to marry someone who didn't speak the language. I was learning Igbo, but I suspected it wouldn't suffice. A baby was on the way, and my bride price was yet to be paid, so naturally I was worried. When I informed Andy that I was pregnant, he rejoiced and congratulated himself on being a virile man able to impregnate a woman. But nothing was said about the payment of my bride price. He put his hand around my belly and asked, "I hope you are going to give me a son." "But what about my bride price?" I asked, ignoring his question. "Stop nagging," he said, getting annoyed. "I have told you that your bride price will be paid." The following week, I visited Aunty Vivian at her shop and learned that my younger sister had captured the heart of a man abroad. He had seen a photo of her and was coming from America to pay her bride price the following month. I decided to attend the ceremony as I wasn't showing yet and could easily hide my condition in a lace bubu gown. When I arrived, I sought out my father and stepmother to congratulate them. "Your younger sister is getting married," my father said. "When will it be your turn?" "How will it be her turn when she is living on her own like a prostitute?" my stepmother asked. "What decent man marries a woman living alone?" I left the ceremony relieved that they were unaware of the truth about my situation, but I was worried that it would soon be exposed. That night, Andy and I had a big fight because I refused his sexual overtures. "Please go and see my father before he finds out that I'm pregnant," I begged. "Save me from shame. If you think denying me sex will make me rush to your father and pay your bride price, then you are gravely mistaken. I can have my sexual needs met elsewhere. You will be the loser in the end." He went to sleep in a different room, leaving me wondering how I had ended up in the same place my mother had been many years before. A few months later, David was born prematurely. Even when the hospital discharged us to go home, he was so tiny that I was scared to hold him or bathe him. Luckily, Aunty Vivian came to spend the day with me, bathing me and the baby. She told me she had informed my father, hoping that as the child was premature, my stepmother would come and stay a few days to look after the baby. But my father said to her, "Tell Ora that since she has chosen to follow her mother's footsteps and have a baby outside marriage, she can't get any assistance with the baby. My wife is preparing to go to America to help my daughter, who married properly and is now pregnant." When I relayed the message to Andy, he assured me that when the baby was a year old, we would go to see my father and the bride price would be paid. However, a few weeks before David's first birthday, we had another fight because I took David to my shop and Andy was furious. He asked me to shut down the business and stay home to look after the fragile child, but I refused as it was my only source of income and I was afraid to let go. Andy announced he had reversed his decision, declining to pay my bride price due to my refusal to obey him. My heart was shattered, and I spent several days crying and roaming the house looking miserable. "It is all your fault," Andy said in response to my misery. "When you are ready to be a submissive wife, I will know, and only then will I pay your bride price." I packed up my business, sold all its assets, and sat at home, ready to be a wife and mother. Andy spoke no more of the bride price payment, and when I reminded him, he flared up and said, "You are not the one to tell me when to go and see your family. If you keep nagging, I will send you away and marry another woman. I stopped bothering him and focused on being a good wife and mother. I didn't complain about anything, especially money matters, and used the money from the sale of my business assets to supplement the upkeep of the home. When the money ran out and I asked Andy for money for my hair, it caused a quarrel, so I began to look for ways to earn. My former cosmate, Maureen, connected me with Afric Foods, a big company outside Benin. She supplied them with farm products, which they processed and exported. That's how I met the CEO, Richard Taylor, an Englishman in his early 50s. With a loan from Aunty Vivian, I completed the order successfully, returned her money, and was back the following week seeking another order. Richard was not there, and I was informed he had gone to the UK for his wife's funeral. However, I received an order and promptly sourced the items, getting paid almost immediately. Andy soon found out about my new business venture and accused me of being a loose woman and sleeping with the CEO to get a purchase order. Once again, he informed me that he would not pay my buy price, but I had ceased to care and accepted my life as his living girlfriend and baby mama. But that was only until Richard returned from the UK a few months later and everything changed. My first meeting with Richard went well, but things changed this time. He took an interest in me as a person, and each week I told him a little more about my life and current relationship, even as I listened to his own journey. He married as a young man, and his wife was in a battle with cancer for the last 5 years, her health declining with each year until her demise. Their only son, Michael, was a 28-year-old postdoctoral researcher who, following his mother's death, was traveling solo around the world. Unlike Andy, Richard took his time. After a few months of chatting, he started giving me gifts whenever we conducted business together. At first, there were small items like the company's products and souvenirs. However, as the months passed, the gifts became more personal, including perfumes, chocolates, and flowers. A couple of weeks back, as I was exiting his office, he held my hand and asked if I was willing to move our relationship forward. "Aura," he began, "my wife passed away a year ago, and I believe I am ready to marry again. I felt a connection with you from the first moment I saw you, but at that time I was married. Even though my wife was terminally ill, it would have been inappropriate for me to pursue a relationship with you. After her death, I promised to take time to mourn her before seeking another partner. Now I am ready to pursue a relationship with you with the intention of marriage. However, I cannot do that while you are living with another man. Therefore, I would like to help you find a place of your own where I can freely express my feelings for you. You don't have to give me an answer right away. Please take your time to think about it, and when you're ready, let me know your decision." I spent very little time considering it. I was done with Andy before I even gave my answer, and Richard moved David and me to a hotel as he searched for a temporary home until our marriage. Andy was surprised. For the first 2 days after I moved out, I heard nothing from him. Then he and his family members started bombarding my phone. They were ready to pay the bride price, but I had lost interest. Richard was showing me daily how a man moved when he was interested in marrying a woman. He visited my father accompanied by friends who were prominent men in Benin, and made his intentions known. My father was getting his house remodeled to make it a worthy venue for our traditional marriage ceremony. He called me for the first time since I left home to say, "Ora, my daughter, you have made me proud. Dignitaries whom I see only on television visited my home today because of you. Richard has already paid your bride price. Anything else is just a formality. He brought more gifts than the man who married your younger sister." What could I say to that? The shame I begged Andy to take away for years, Richard had taken away. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of cars driving into the premises, followed by a loud knock on the front door. "That's my cue to leave," Adesua said, hurriedly gathering her things and rushing towards the door. I opened the door, and just as I thought, it was Richard. As Adesua stepped out, he stepped in, and I walked into his arms, and knew that at last, after years of searching for a home, for a place where I belonged, I had found it. "I take it you like the house?" he asked, and I nodded, still unable to speak. How did I tell him that it was much more than the house? "I am glad you like it," he said, "because I have something else for you." I pulled back and stepped outside with him, and only then did I notice the red Range Rover Evoque with a big bow behind Richard's Toyota Land Cruiser. "Is that a car?" I asked. He laughed. "I hope it is, because that's what I ordered." The afternoon passed in a blur of activities. I test drove my new car, and then we had lunch. Afterwards, Richard showed me the building plans for the house he wanted to build for me, which he aimed to have ready by the time we were married. When he left later that evening, I was still basking in the joy of my new beginning. The end. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of episode 8 of DOZ Monologues. DOZ Monologues will return next week with another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave your comments and subscribe, like and share if listening on YouTube. To contact me, please visit my website eturuvieerebor.com or email me at eturuvie@eturuvieerebor.com. I invite all story lovers to explore my novels and novellas available on Amazon and Google Books. For audiobook enthusiasts, they are also on Audible. Thank you for listening. I am your favorite storyteller, Eturuvie Erebor, and I'll be here next Friday with another story.